Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is a debate that I was interested in seeing. It's Pisco versus Ryan Maloney, whatever his name is. I'm curious about the debate. I think it's about birthright citizenship, and this is apparently a new format, World War debate. I mean, I've said what my opinions are about political debate. The moment you make the political debate a show, at that point, I feel like it's useless. I think political debate in and itself is a means to kind of get ideas across, maybe even in a more aggressive format, to really dissect the points that are being made. If you're just making it a game, I just don't find any value with it. My thing is, politics is something that's supposed to be about solving issues that help the people. The whole like who can debate better, I don't give two shits who can debate better. But I'm gonna react to it. I'm gonna give my analysis and commentary about this in general. So it is about birthright citizenship. So let's dive right into it.
War debate.
And I am standing beside Pisco. Pisco, how you doing? What are you?
Well,
You're good?
ready to defend the Constitution, ready to defend the rule of law. It's under attack by this administration.
Ryan Malali versus Pisco Liddy, and we're going to be debating birthright citizenship.
You claim history, you claim precedent. The Supreme Court said, notwithstanding the fact that Wang Kim Ark's parents are subject to the Emperor of China, that none.
All right, guys, and welcome to Word War Debate. I'm Sam Tripoli.
So I know obviously erudite, of course, because of like the Destiny bubble. I know she's been doing her own thing, and I know this guy from that one like video where he had Candace Owens and one of a really old black dude. And he's a magtard. Don't know who this is. Obviously, Erudite's not a magtard.
We are live from.
I don't care about the rules. Let's get into the debate. I don't care about the interview. I don't care about the openings. I just want the open debate. Let's do it.
All right, you also finished it with 30 seconds left. Nice job. Okay, so those were the two opening statements, 5 minutes apiece. We're now going to go into the open debate. It's 25 minutes long. Gentlemen.
What does jurisdiction mean, Ryan?
So what Pisco's doing here is he's starting with the definition, and I see why. The reason is that jurisdiction is one of those words that has a lot of meanings. So if we say that we can sit here all day and talk about the meaning of jurisdiction, we'll never get anywhere. I'll actually quote the Supreme Court in a case called Contract v. Ryan. This was Justice Ginsburg, for whatever that's worth. Jurisdiction is a word of too many meanings. But here's what I will say, Pisco. You mentioned Black's Law Dictionary, right?
Well, yeah, so Black's Law has multiple definitions in it. Subject to the jurisdiction, in that context, what do you propose that it means?
Well, can I back you up a second?
Sure, but I would like for you to...
Black's Law Dictionary, for those who don't know, is, I think Pisco would agree with me, the most authoritative, the most well-known.
I've done one thing of like organized debate, kind of. I did this thing like called mock trial in college. I thought it was some pre-law thing, so I did it. It's kind of fun. I even won an award. I don't know where my award's at, but I was pretty good at it.
Law Dictionary.
It's well known, but it's among many different dictionary definitions, which confirms that power, authority, what it means to be subject to the jurisdiction of a country is to be beholden to its laws. If illegal immigrants, even assuming that the 14th Amendment were targeted at the parents, which it's not, I just told you, it's targeted to the children, even assuming it was, of course, people who are here and who came illegally are subject to the laws of the United States. They're bound by them.
Even if they're here temporarily?
Yes, and in fact, you misquote Wang Kim Ark when you say it's just permanent people there. In Wang Kim Ark specifically, they reference the case that they're citing, which talks about temporary people staying in the country. And they knew that even people here of Chinese descent, that's what they're mentioning, who are here on a temporary basis, are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. Scalia recognizes that that's what the term means. Conservative jurists like Judge Ho have recognized this. It's what it means, and you have no alternative definition that you've offered.
Well, let's back up a second, and we can talk about Wang Kim Ark, I'm sure we will for a long time. But you mentioned Black's Law Dictionary in your opening, and you said here that you think birthright citizenship should attend even if the parents are here temporarily. So since you said that, I'm delighted you did.
I don't know how I feel about like the spacing of the contestants. I'm not gonna say anything about like camera quality, but if you have this here and then you have them spaced out like this here, I don't know. Word war debate. I don't know. It might work. Maybe they should be a little bit closer. Maybe they should be able to make eye contact with each other. I don't know. Maybe I'm nitpicking.
I'd like to read you something. This is from Henry Campbell Black. So it says here that you think birthright citizenship should attend even if the parents are here temporarily. So since you said that, I'm delighted you did. I'd like to read you something. This is from Henry Campbell Black, the author of Black's Law Dictionary, in his Handbook of American Constitutional Law, published in 1910. And he wrote, and I quote, "This jurisdiction," in reference to the 14th Amendment, "must at the time be both actual and exclusive. So if a stranger or traveler passing through the country or temporarily residing here, but who has not himself been naturalized and who claims to have no allegiance to our government, has a child born here who goes out of the country with his father, such child is not a citizen of the United States."
That's not the question.
Not subject to its jurisdiction. So Pisco, very author of Black's Law Dictionary, who you cited in your opening, agrees with me.
So he not true.
His interpretation of constitutional law, and he's on my side.
It's not true. So you have offered no definition of what is. Hang on a second. I let you finish. I let you finish. Subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That is a reference to authority, to power. And if you look at Black's Law Dictionary, you'll see that definition. And I'm asking whatever his interpretation is of the 14th Amendment isn't what we're talking about. We're talking about the meaning of the term subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And I'm asking you now for the third time, Ryan, what does that term mean?
Pisco, this is what's so embarrassing about this for you.
So Pisco, maybe I should have listened to the opening statements. Maybe I should, for me to get because everything that they're doing for their debate is deriving from the opening statement, which, like, I understand, I get. I do think you should make a claim and then go from the claim itself. But it seems like they're kind of deriving from points made in the opening statement, which I'm not against. But it does require me to listen to opening statements, and I really just don't want to. But I don't know. I'll think about it. I will say, so Pisco is alluding to a definition of jurisdiction from this individual. Let's listen. We have to listen to opening statements to really understand what we're talking about. All right, let's do it.
In our country right now, we have something called universal birthright citizenship. What does that mean? It means that anybody, with basically no exceptions, who has a child in this country, the child.
My perception is Ryan is
I hate to interrupt you.
I'll be honest. My perception is that Ryan pretends that he's like this centrist good guy. I think in general, he thinks that the America should be a majority white population. That's my opinion about him. I think a lot of his actions kind of lead into that conclusion, but that's just me. I could be wrong, but that's just me.
Can you lean into your mic more?
Sure,
We're just having a hard time hearing you.
If someone comes here illegally, they cross the border illegally, we reward them with citizenship for their child. Now, you don't have to take my word for this problem. This is a quote from Judge Posner.
How are we rewarding the parents and not paying attention to the child? Doesn't the well-being of the child take precedent on what is happening to the parents? How is the parents being rewarded from something that's happening to a different human being entirely? Isn't that diminishing the life and the existence of the child itself? I don't know. I'm just not sold on that argument. We're rewarding the parents because a child gets citizenship. Aren't we rewarding the child? Isn't the child the one we should be focused on? It's interesting. It's always interesting when like conservatives want to pick and choose when they care about human life.
One of the most respected judges in America. He's talking about a related problem. He said, there is a huge and growing industry in Asia that arranges tourist visas for pregnant women so they can fly to the United States and give birth to an American. Obviously, Judge Posner continued, this was not the intent of the 14th Amendment of our Constitution. It makes a mockery of citizenship. And that's the problem we have today. And it's the problem that someone like Pisco
makes a mockery of citizenship.
How? Universal birthright.
How? Like, what is the argument that this is what they're doing is making a mockery of citizenship? Like, what is the negative thing that is taking place? Or do you just feel dissatisfied that these group of people are, birthing U.S. citizens? It'll be one thing if we had like a population problem where like we have too many people and these kind of faux pas citizens are like negatively affecting us in some way. But I've yet to hear a good argument how. Is it the most ethical thing to do to get citizenship in America and then just leave? Probably not. But I'm more interested in like why that is not from his perspective. Is it like a national security thing? That might be a legitimate argument if you can make it properly. Is it a assimilation thing? Okay. But if they're not in America, so who cares if they're assimilating or not? Is it affecting the votes thing because they are not integrated into the culture? And I don't know. I'll be curious to kind of dissect that in particular. I know what he's referring to. There is just a huge problem with like Chinese women, and it's not a large scale issue, but it's definitely an issue to pay attention to and to figure out the best way to deal with it. But this is not wide encompassing. So is he using like this one circumstance to make a full argument against birthright citizenship being universal?
Citizenship. But here's the thing. President Trump was correct to attempt to limit this because the Constitution does not require it. Instead, the Constitution guarantees birthright citizenship to people who are born of at least one parent which has political allegiance to the United States. That's called complete jurisdiction is the legal term. How do I know this? Do you have to take my word for it? No, you don't. You can go back to 1884 to 1872, around the time when the 14th Amendment to our Constitution was ratified. And the court said this. I'll quote the court in L. P. Watkins. The Supreme Court said, birthright citizenship happens when they are completely subject to the political jurisdiction and owing complete and immediate allegiance. The Supreme Court knew this back then. They knew you needed complete allegiance, complete jurisdiction, not universal birthright citizenship. But how did the Supreme Court know this? They listened to the debates in Congress. The people who wrote the 14th Amendment said so. Senator Lyman Trumbull said, what do we mean by subject of the jurisdiction for the purposes of birthright citizenship? It means not owing allegiance to anybody else.
So I know I can't, there's no way I'm looking up every single like case law that they're referring to. I'm just not going to do that. But I will bring up this. This is kind of like the core of the aspect of birthright citizenship. The 14th Amendment, where it says all persons or all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So there's a couple of terms that they're going to try to define in this debate. Right now, what he's determining is what does jurisdiction thereof mean? Okay. Are citizens of the United States in the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Jurisdiction. I'm sure that's going to be a big debate point, determining what jurisdiction means, what jurisdiction is. So he's referring to some things. I might look up some of the things that he's referring to, but I'll allow him to carry on.
That's what it means. The Supreme Court know this. They listen. I'll quote the court in L. P. Watkins. The Supreme Court said, birthright citizenship happens when they are completely subject to the political jurisdiction and owing complete and immediate allegiance. The Supreme Court knew this back then. They knew you needed complete allegiance, complete jurisdiction, not universal birthright citizenship. But how did the Supreme Court know this? They listened to the debates in Congress. The people who wrote.
So Pisco is going to have to rebuttal against the idea. Either he's lying or he's misinterpreting the aspect of the Supreme Court saying that you need complete jurisdiction.
The 14th Amendment said so. Senator Lyman Trumbull said, what do we mean by subject of the jurisdiction for the purposes of birthright citizenship? It means not owing allegiance to anybody else. That's what it means. You can't be a citizen of another country and get birthright citizenship for your child. He said subject to the
No, that's not, that doesn't sound like what it says. I think you're adding a little bit on. Again, I'm going to make the point. You can't be a citizen of a different state or a different locale and be a citizen of the United States. Sure. I don't think anything you said determines whether or not the child who was born does not qualify under the complete jurisdiction method. He's applying a level of accountability to the child in reference to the parents. And these are just two different beings. They're two different individuals. Regardless of what the parents do, regardless of why the parents are here, how does that play into the child not getting citizenship? Right? You're removing a level of sovereignty away from the child, considering who or where they are, who or what they're doing in their life. So I think there's a conflation that he's doing in his argument. Keep on bringing up parents, but I'm curious to see if Pisco will be able to deal with that as well.
Jurisdiction thereof means subject to the complete jurisdiction, which is exactly what President Trump is arguing and what I'm arguing today. Senator John Bingham, another drafter,
because parents' child
said
shouldn't
that you couldn't get birthright citizenship unless you were not owing an allegiance to any foreign sovereignty. If the parents were foreign citizens,
but the parents are not the child. Who cares if the parents have sovereignty to a different nation? That doesn't mean the child shouldn't get birthright citizenship. This is a weird argument he's trying to make.
they could not get birthright citizenship. That's what he said. But if Posner's word isn't good enough for you, and the Supreme Court's word isn't good enough for you, and if the drafters of the 14th Amendment's words aren't good enough for you, you can look at the overwhelming historic evidence that this is what birthright citizenship means in this country, which you can trace to the Civil War of 1861. You can trace it through the Civil Rights Act of 1866, to the ratification of the 14th Amendment in 1868, the overwhelming agreement of scholars in the period that followed, and the practices of our own government, all which show that universal birthright citizenship is a recent invention, not a constitutional requirement. We can and we should fix it. Now, against this overwhelming tide of evidence, Pisco is going to more or less hang his hat on one case. It's called Wong Kim Ark. He's going to tell you all about it. I'll leave that to him because it's his side of the argument. But here's the thing you need to know about Wong Kim Ark, and you really only need to know one thing. Wong Kim Ark only says that you have to give birthright citizenship if the parents are here permanently and legally. And President Trump agrees with that. He doesn't disagree with that. He doesn't want to change that. He agrees with that. What President Trump wants to change is if you're here illegally, if you're here temporarily doing birth tourism. He wants to say that those situations don't warrant citizenship in the greatest country on earth. And the Constitution doesn't require it. So the Supreme Court should change it. And I'll let Pisco tell you all about why I'm wrong.
Nicely done, and you have 30 seconds to spare. All right, good job, Ryan. By the way, I just want to mention too, if you are comfortable with it, you can take the mics out if you want to hold them in your hands. Okay, great. But nice job. All right, Pisco, you're up. We're going to reset that timer, and we'll give you your 5 minutes.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. And thanks, everyone, for being here. I think it's a really important conversation. And I thank you, Word War Debate, and also shout out Rob Knorr. So we're all trying to figure out what this term means in the 14th Amendment. And the words are as follows: all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state in which they reside. Those are the words. And the weight of evidence is overwhelming that the Supreme Court got it right in Wong Kim Ark. Let's start with the text. Let's go through an originalist understanding of the text. All persons, no limitation, born in the United States geographically. The only dispute is on what this term subject to the jurisdiction thereof means. What kind of limitation is it? And you can look up dictionaries now. You can look up dictionaries that existed at the time. And what jurisdiction means is subject to the political authority, subject to the laws, subject to the power of the United States government. Notice also in that phrase, all persons born or naturalized, the subject is not the parents. The subject is the children. Are the children?
There we go, Pisco. That's what I'm talking about. Because the conflation is very deceptive. There we go. Come on, keep going.
Subject to the jurisdiction of the United States government. Just, you can start and end there with a plain meaning of what jurisdiction means, what they understood jurisdiction mean at the time. Ryan will provide you no definition that you'll find in Black's Law Dictionary or in the contemporaneous writings of the framers of the 14th Amendment that suggests that jurisdiction is equal to this ultimately elastic test of political allegiance. Because of course it's not. What the framers were doing of the 14th Amendment was incorporating the English common law rule regarding birthright citizenship. Our American legal system isn't built out of whole cloth. It's built on a foundation of English law. That was what we imported into this country. And the law persisting in the United Kingdom or in the British Empire at the time was this law of birthright citizenship. And there were clear exceptions as recognized by the court in Wong Kim Ark that were limited and narrow to the children of ambassadors, to the children of foreign and conquering armies behind enemy lines, and then in these pseudo kind of sovereign spheres in the American context of American Indians. So that's what they meant to do. That's what the words mean. And putting aside that Elk versus Watkins, a case that Ryan cites, was cited also by the court in Wong Kim Ark. There's no contradiction between Elk v. Watkins and Wong Kim Ark. But there's a broader structural point that I want you all to take home. We have to remember what was happening in the country when the 14th Amendment was passed. We had just gone through one of the most devastating wars, the most devastating war in American history. Estimates of almost like 1 million people dead. The entire South, or much of the South and many of its major cities, ruined. Remember what started that conflict. We all know the easy answer, right? The easy answer is slavery. But there's a more fundamental layer behind that, which is what the war was about who's part of the club. It's a Jeffersonian ideal, whether all men are created equal. Remember Dred Scott. What was the Dred Scott decision about? Whether members of the slave race could be considered American citizens in this context. Now, when you realize what had happened, what the framers were trying to do, which is to prevent another conflagration like we saw in the Civil War, of course, what they wanted to do by passing a constitutional provision, not a statute, was not just overturn Dred Scott, but to make a rule that was administrable, a rule that was simple, a rule that was easy, a rule that they were familiar with. They didn't want an ultimately elastic test for the states to decide what citizenship was, or for Congress to later change what citizenship was, because they had just gone through that. And so any rule which Ryan is going to provide that turns on this ultimately elastic test of whatever he thinks political allegiance means is going to have to run into that. The framing generation after the Civil War, after Lincoln's assassination, never wanting to have a fight like this again, to firmly settle the issue. And that's ultimately what they did in the 14th Amendment by having the territorial rule with the limited common law exceptions. That's what it says, and that's what they meant.
Okay. All right.
All right. You also finished it with 30 seconds left. Nice job. Okay. So those were the two opening statements, 5 minutes apiece. We're now going to go into the open debate. It's 25 minutes long. Gentlemen.
What does jurisdiction mean, Ryan?
So what Pisco's doing here is he's starting with the definition. And I see why. The reason is that jurisdiction is one of those words that has a lot of meanings. So if we say that we can sit here all day and talk about the meaning of jurisdiction, we'll never get anywhere. I'll actually quote the Supreme Court in a case called.
We can sit here, go over the definition of jurisdiction, and won't get anywhere. So defining jurisdiction is not important? Okay, well, let's see how it goes.
Contract D. Ryan. This was Justice Ginsburg, for whatever that's worth. Jurisdiction is a word of too many meanings. But here's what I will say, Pisco. You mentioned Black's Law Dictionary, right?
Well, yeah, so Black's Law has multiple definitions in it. Subject to the jurisdiction, in that context, what?
Law Dictionary, right? Of too many meanings. But here's what I will say, Pisco. You mentioned.
So you named the random Supreme Court justice saying jurisdiction has too many meanings. That doesn't really mean anything to me. It's not substantive. It seems like you are kind of running away from the issue. But okay, let's see how they proceed now.
Black's Law Dictionary, right?
Well, yeah, so Black's Law has multiple definitions in it. Subject to the jurisdiction, in that context, what do you propose that it means?
Well, can I back you up a second?
Sure, but I would like for you to.
Black's Law Dictionary, for those who don't.
So I got this Dubai style chocolate. Pistachio cream, Cadia filled milk chocolate. It looked interesting, and I'm one to just try things. Definitely got a pistachio taste, but it's kind of too pistachio-y. I don't know how I feel about it. I kind of don't like it. I'm not gonna lie. I'm kind of not a fan.
No, I think Pisco would agree with me, the most authoritative, the most well-known law dictionary.
It's well-known, but it's among many different dictionary definitions, which confirms that power, authority, what it means to be subject to the jurisdiction of a country is to be beholden to its laws. If illegal immigrants, even assuming that the 14th Amendment were targeted at the parents, which it's not, I just told you, it's targeted to the children, even assuming it was, of course, people who are here and who came illegally are subject to the laws of the United States. They're bound by them.
Even if they're here temporarily?
Yes, and in fact, you misquote Wong Kim Ark when you say it's just permanent people there. In Wong Kim Ark specifically, they reference the case that they're citing, which talks about temporary people staying in the country. And they knew that even people here of Chinese descent, that's what they're mentioning, who are here on a temporary basis, are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. Scalia recognizes that that's what the term means. Conservative jurists like Judge Ho have recognized this. It's what it means, and you have no alternative definition that you've offered.
Well, let's back up a second, and we can talk about Wong Kim Ark, and I'm sure we will for a long time. But you mentioned Black's Law Dictionary in your opening, and you said here that you think birthright citizenship should attend even if the parents are here temporarily. So since you said that, I'm delighted you did. I'd like to read you something. This is from Henry Campbell Black, the author of Black's Law Dictionary, in his Handbook of American Constitutional Law, published in 1910. And he wrote, and I...
So obviously we know what this is, but this sounds more like a trap where it's befuddling the issue. Because he initially said this, right? And then Pisco, he tried to make it seem like Pisco.
I'll actually quote the Supreme Court in a case called Contract v. Ryan. This was Justice Ginsburg. You mentioned Black's Law Dictionary, right?
Well, yeah, so Black's Law has multiple definitions in it, subject to the jurisdiction. In that context, what do you propose that it means?
Well, can I back you up?
So he's referencing Black's Law in defining jurisdiction. That's what he's trying to define.
Sure, but I would like for you to...
Black's Law Dictionary, for those who don't know, is, I think Pisco would agree with me, the most authoritative, the most well-known law dictionary.
It's well-known, but it's among many different dictionary definitions, which confirms that power, authority, what it means to be subject to the jurisdiction of a country is to be beholden to its laws. If illegal immigrants, even assuming that the 14th Amendment were targeted at the parents, which it's not, I just told you, it's targeted to the children, even assuming it was, of course, people who are here and who came illegally.
Okay, so the Black's Law argument, well, Pisco saying that he's just using Black's Law to determine the definition of jurisdiction. Ryan's going to use it to give a claim about the 14th Amendment.
Here of Chinese descent, that's what the term means. Alternative definition.
Or not the 14th Amendment, birthright citizenship.
That you've offered.
Henry Campbell Black, the author, and he wrote, and I quote, "This jurisdiction," in reference to the 14th Amendment, "must at the time be both actual and exclusive. So if a stranger or traveler passing through the country or temporarily residing here, but who has not himself been naturalized and who claims to have no allegiance to our government, has a child born here who goes out of the country with his father, such child is not a citizen of the United States."
That's not the question.
Not subject to its jurisdiction.
That's
so Pisco,
the
very author of
so
Black's
it's not
Law
true.
Dictionary, who you cited in your opening, agrees with me.
So it's not
wrote
true.
down his interpretation of constitutional law, and he's on my side.
It's not true. So you have offered no definition of what is. Hang on a second. I let you finish. I let you finish. Subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That is a reference to authority, to power. And if you look at Black's Law Dictionary, you'll see that definition. And I'm asking whatever his interpretation is of the 14th Amendment isn't what we're talking about. We're talking about the meaning of the term subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And I'm asking you now for the third time, Ryan, what does that term mean?
Pisco, this is what's so embarrassing.
Okay, so I think what Pisco should have done here to be a little bit more potent in this is really sparse out the legitimacy of the definition that he's trying to apply. So what Ryan is trying to do is tear apart the credibility of his source. Pisco says the idea of jurisdiction is adhering to the laws of the powers to be, the country. One of the sources that relate into this idea of this definition is Black's Law Dictionary. Now, Pisco did note other sources that agree with this kind of this definition, this claim, but Ryan is trying to muddy the conversation by focusing specifically on Black's Law to tear apart the credibility of the aspect of the definition he's trying to utilize. So Ryan doesn't want to define it, and he wants to tear apart Pisco's definition. So Pisco has to contend with that.
about this for you. I quoted him. He said, this jurisdiction must at the time be actual and exclusive, and then continue to explain that if somebody was here temporarily, there would be no birth.
So let's test it. So let's test it.
No,
So let's test. We're gonna test it, Ryan.
No,
so we're gonna
test it.
Ryan. We're gonna test it.
Acknowledge you cited blacks. Black agrees with me, correct?
Whether he does on the 14th Amendment is,
Correct.
is immaterial.
Correct.
I don't know that you're properly representing his views on the 14th Amendment.
I am
and of course,
absolutely
and of course, you would agree that the authoritative sources about what the meaning of the Constitution is relates to the original public meaning.
Pisco, this was your source.
Just to be clear.
You brought it up.
Guys, you're talking so much over each other.
So we're going to get an assertion from Ryan. Ryan, is it or is it not the case that you subscribe to a theory of judicial interpretation called original public meaning?
I do, though.
So
whether or
Wait,
not,
hold on. If you ask him a question,
Yeah,
let him answer.
Go for it.
I do, but just to head this off at the pass, whether or not my own philosophy
Okay.
has any relevance to this, I don't
So
understand.
let's
But
feel.
if you want to
So
talk about
you would agree
my
that
beliefs, we
under
can.
the notion of original public meaning,
Mhm.
what matters isn't the specific intentions and thoughts and opinions of someone who writes a dictionary, correct?
But I gave you, Pisco.
Correct or not?
I gave
Correct
you
or
in my
not?
opening. I just want to recall so that you and the audience remembers.
Yeah.
I cited the Supreme Court. I cited the people who wrote this, and then I cited overwhelming historic evidence, which I'm happy to provide. I'm not saying that Black's himself is dispositive. I'm
So
saying
the-
it's good
so Black's
evidence, and
Law
it's particularly
Dictionary-
good evidence because he's an authoritative source that
So-
you yourself reference.
So Black's Law Dictionary, from an originalist perspective, isn't relevant insofar as Black's specific intentions with respect to a word. It's because the words of the dictionary, as they're understood by the public, is what controls. That's what the judicial philosophy is about. And of course, you're citing the Supreme Court in Elk versus Watkins. That's a
To kind of expand on Pisco's point, it's like whoever created the like what's a dictionary? It's like what are different types of dictionaries? Why can't I think of it? Dictionary, Merriam-Webster dictionary. It's like we're talking about the Merriam-Webster dictionary, and the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines a word, and then you talk about, well, the person who created the Merriam-Webster dictionary has decided that this word or has a different interpretation of its meaning. It's like we're not going to utilize the person who's created it versus the definition itself. Now, it's a little bit different if the definitions were created by the individual. So just because you create a dictionary doesn't mean you create the definition. So we're saying that he created the definition of jurisdiction, or did he just source it based off different interpretive analysis on how it's perceived? Black's Law Dictionary. Let me look that up. What is Black's Law Dictionary? So it uses different definitions. So the idea that Ryan is trying to use the creator of Black's Law Dictionary when he uses different sources to come up with the definition is ridiculous. That's a ridiculous thing to do, right? You would not do that. So in this situation, just because Pisco used a document that it's like a database, just because he used a database which uses a lot of different sources to come up with different definitions, doesn't mean that the person who created the database is the ultimate authority on what all these words mean. That's just not how it works. So it's a little bit of a dishonest tactic, but Pisco can't fall into the trap that Ryan is trying to lay out to like tear apart the authority of the definition he's using. Pisco needs to make that very clear that this is a ridiculous argument to make. I'll see if he could do it. I mean, the purpose of defining words in the debate so that both sides understand what they're talking about. I agree. And in this situation, Pisco wanted to define jurisdiction. Ryan doesn't want to engage with the conversation to define jurisdiction. So he chose a very weaselly tactic to attack the credibility of the definition that is being used.
decision that supports my position. That's a decision that supports the English common law as the root of what the 14th Amendment means. And that's what's brought in by Wong Kim Ark. So we're going to now test your theory. So what is your assertion about what the term subject to the jurisdiction thereof means? This is the fourth time I'm answering. I'm asking to answer
It requires complete jurisdiction. And I know that because...
Wait. What does that mean?
When you look at what the people who wrote this phrase said, here's Senator Lyman Trumbull, and Pisco asked for originalism. This is the cleanest piece of originalist evidence you will...
So again, Ryan is not engaging with defining the terms he's using. He's relying on interpretation of the terms, application, which I guess inherently can be similar. I don't know. It just really depends. We'll see if Pisco can parse that out.
Ever see. What he said, and remember, we're talking about the phrase subject to the jurisdiction thereof, and my argument, it means
What does it mean? What does subject to the jurisdiction thereof mean?
You gotta let me answer the question. I'm just trying to frame this. My point is subject to the jurisdiction thereof means the complete jurisdiction. And here is what Senator Trumbull, who helped write the 14th Amendment, here's what he said. Subject to the jurisdiction thereof means subject to the complete jurisdiction thereof. It's word for word.
What does that?
Yeah, you're not defining it. This means this, but with one extra word. What the fuck is that? What are we doing there?
Write the 14th Amendment. Here's what he said. Subject to the jurisdiction thereof means subject to the complete jurisdiction thereof. It's word for word. Subject to the jurisdiction thereof means the complete jurisdiction. And here is what Senator Trumbull, who helped write the 14th Amendment, here's what he said. Subject.
Let's just because someone helped write the amendment doesn't mean that he's the complete authority on it. Let's see if Pisco can rebuttal that. I don't think he really needs to, but we'll see. You can just look up the original case law for Wong Kim Mark, and it outlines exactly what they're talking about. Yeah, I'm gonna wait until they start talking about it. They keep on talking about that case, but they haven't started discussing it yet. They're really just kind of focusing on the semantics of the definition of jurisdiction and the authority that determines how jurisdiction should be used. So that's the only thing that's going on right now.
To the jurisdiction thereof means subject to the complete jurisdiction thereof. It's word for word.
What does that? Wait, no. You're just replacing.
It's word for word.
So notice what's going on here. He says the meaning of subject to the jurisdiction thereof means the complete jurisdiction of the United States. Correct? Complete jurisdiction. I'm asking you what that means. What does complete jurisdiction in that context mean?
Political allegiance. So
political allegiance.
To give you the history lesson.
Just to be clear, let's get out of personalities. You just heard him say.
Let him answer it first.
Political allegiance was not like an empty term back then. Remember, Pisco reminded you there was just a civil war. Now, one of the things that happened in the Civil War is that there was a draft in 1863. And in the draft, they had to figure out who could be drafted to fight. They had an odd situation because there were foreigners living in America permanently. They had been here a long time. But when draft day came, all of a sudden, they're not American, they're French, and they don't want to fight. And the country had to figure out who was sufficiently ours. Who do we have complete jurisdiction over? Who has political allegiance to this country? So what?
I don't think you're really defining political allegiance using the basis of a draft. Of course, the draft needs a certain level of like, what's the word? Dare I say? I guess allegiance, sure, but it's more so allegiance due to being able to risk your life for the country. Do you need to risk your life for the country to determine whether or not you're a citizen? I don't think that is a qualification behind the term or a requirement behind the term. So this is not an example that I think holds much weight.
Congress did in 1863, just a few years before they ratified the 14th Amendment, is that they decided that foreigners who had signed what's called a Declaration of Intent could be drafted. Why? Because in the Declaration of Intent, the foreigners said that they forswore their foreign allegiances and that they wanted to be U.S. citizens. And by doing that, we now had complete jurisdiction over them because they had accepted political allegiance in this country.
You haven't explained the concept.
Yeah, you just talking about swearing off foreign allegiances has no bearing in terms of people who are born. Someone who's born in a country has no foreign allegiance. Someone born in a country automatically is allegiant to the place that they're located at. Now, you could depending on how they grow up, there's different environmental factors that determine how their allegiance gets kind of either bloomed, flowered up, determine whether or not it stays where it's at, stay where it planted, or it kind of gets eroded to a different location. Yes, but that's a different conversation altogether. We're talking about being born here. This is not synonymous. These are not equal things. Simple example can easily show what he's talking about.
I
of
just
so
explained the
So,
concept.
so just to be clear, you didn't. What you just said are things that people in this situation could do to suffice political allegiance, but you haven't explained the concept of political allegiance. It sounds like what you're suggesting is political allegiance is some sort of commitment in favor of the government of the United States. Is that correct?
Yeah, there are things in our government that require political allegiance. For example, you cannot be charged with treason unless you owe the government allegiance. That makes sense, because if you don't owe the government allegiance, you can't be treasonous against the government.
you're not
Similarly,
defining
you
the
can't
concept.
be drafted unless you owe the government political allegiance, because it doesn't make sense. You don't owe the government your military service unless you owe them political allegiance. And this was definitely on the mind of the people who wrote this document in 1866, because it happened 3 years earlier in 1863. So this is definitely what they were thinking about at the time they wrote these words.
This is
Something happening 3 years earlier does not mean this is what that's a weird way to determine someone's intent. That's a very, very loose way to determine intent. I agree with Pisco. He's not defining anything he's saying. He's kind of being a little Weasley with it. Chinese woman comes to America, a pregnant birth child, and then takes child back to China for the next 18 years. That child should not be a citizen of the USA, as they're under the jurisdiction of China. Yeah, the Chinese situation, I might as well look it up, because I know about that story, about that situation taking place. I don't know if this is meaningfully significant enough to change the entire way the law works, but I do think it's something to
how extreme Ryan's interpretation is when he views political allegiance as the definition of jurisdiction through these confused and ultimately futile references to the debates which he's misrepresenting. Political allegiance, if that were the basis of subject to the jurisdiction thereof, freed black slaves wouldn't necessarily have political allegiance to the United States government, and therefore wouldn't be freed. But everyone agrees that at a bare minimum, the Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment gave citizenship to those people. If it turns on political allegiance, that is...
As far as the crux of what they're talking about, but neither are going there. I mean, that's not, I guess. I mean, ultimately, when regarding the Chinese stuff, so it's very difficult. You would have to change the entire 14th Amendment to mitigate that in particular, but then you would have to argue, is it worth, like, for such a minute situation, like, should we change the entire 14th Amendment? Now, I do know for a fact that a lot of these women who are doing these operations, these women got in trouble. A lot of these people who are doing these operations, they got in trouble. They should get locked up. You can't be doing it. It's literally kind of, it's human trafficking. Dare I say, it's human trafficking, where you're just forcing kids to kind of move here and there for your own selfish purposes. That's not okay. So you should be held accountable. That should not be okay. But that's just not a good enough reason to repeal the 14th Amendment, because ultimately you would have to kind of have a determination on when are you going to decide whether or not they're a citizen. The moment that you're born in the United States, they're born in that hospital, that determination is that the doctor saw them come out of a woman, go like, okay, you were born here, you are a U.S. citizen. Everything that happens afterwards is irrelevant. I saw you come out of the womb, you're a U.S. citizen at that point. You were born on the lands of the United States of America. Now, a lot of parents could do a lot of different things to make them as like non-American as possible. And I do think there should be a level of punishment there, but that doesn't play into whether or not that doesn't play into the fact that they're a citizen the moment they were born. That situation, that split second, is already kind of embedded into who they are at that point.
Precisely what the founding generation of this amendment wanted to avoid: an elastic test where the states
Everything
would
gets
determine what
taken
political
advantage of.
allegiance means,
Corruption,
where the Congress
like
would determine
every
political allegiance to
amendment.
be some kind of loyalty to the
But
United States.
it has to be
This is
meaningful
called law.
enough
They wanted was
to
a
the point
clean,
where it's a
simple
net
rule
negative for the United
according
States.
to the English common law. And what the English common law viewed allegiance as, the term of art, it's not what he's sort of importing in, was if you were born on the king's land, you are a subject of the king. That's what they meant. Allegiance and protection are one in one. And it implies a duty to obey the king's laws. Now, who is absent that duty and that protection? ambassadors, diplomatic people, foreign conquering armies, and in the case of America, the American Indian tribes. So that, of course, makes complete sense. What doesn't make sense is an interpretation of jurisdiction, which means political allegiance, which wouldn't even guarantee citizenship to freed slaves. That, of course, must be a preposterous reading of the 14th Amendment.
Pisco said a bunch of things there that are dead wrong, so I'm going to try to correct them. I'm going to do it briefly, and then we might zoom in on them, but if you don't mind, let me work through because you had quite a monologue there. The first is Pisco asserts that my definition would not necessarily have given citizenship to free black slaves. That's absurd. If you were here for multiple generations, the question is, who do you owe allegiance to? Is it to some potentate in Africa in a country that you've never been to? Is it really reasonable that you would be charged with treason or drafted into the military to a country you've never seen? No, obviously, the allegiance was to the United States. There's no question about that.
Wait, we're talking about the kids. Wait, we're talking about the kids.
You had a very long list.
About the kids. We're talking about
Yeah, the whole idea of you being there for generations is irrelevant. The slave, once their child is born, at that point, are they a citizen? He keeps on kind of referring to adults, talking about their foreign allegiance. That is irrelevant. He's trying to muddy the conversation. Stop bringing that up. We're talking about children who are born. That is birthright citizenship. That's the conversation. This whole idea about citizenship from people that are fucking grown-ass men or grown-ass women is irrelevant to the conversation. Okay, by what Pisco just said, if someone comes here illegally, they automatically wouldn't qualify. If someone comes here illegally, they automatically wouldn't qualify. Oh, I didn't catch what he said exactly in terms of what you're referring to. I mean, slaves came here illegally, so I mean, that's probably his argument immediately, right? Like, if you're human trafficked here, you came here illegally, and how are you going to determine whether or not they're illegal at that point? You know what I'm saying? There's just too much of it. It's just too much.
You had a very long list. Let me give the highlights, and then we can zoom in.
We're talking about the kids, not the parents.
We can zoom in where you'd like afterwards, Pisco. Second, Pisco asserted that the English common law should govern. This is also ridiculous because he said it himself. The English common law was not about birthright citizenship. It was about birthright subjecthood. You were a subject of the king. You could never expatriate. You could never renounce your citizenship. You were loyal forever. And guess who that applied to? All the Americans pre-revolution. And then we fought a revolution specifically to get rid of that rule because if we were subjects of the king, the revolution is obviously illegal.
That's not what the war was about.
So the idea
That's not what the war was about.
Over is absolutely nonsense. And then the biggest whopper, it's a technical one, but it's just wrong. Pisco said that Congress can't change citizenship. They wanted to have it set in stone by the 14th Amendment, which is just factually incorrect.
No, change. Sorry. So Congress isn't able to adjust what the 14th Amendment means through statute. One of the reasons they were trying to pass a constitutional provision was, one, to overturn Dred Scott, but they didn't use the words and only freed slaves shall be citizens, right? They used more general language. And of course, they didn't want the language that they were specifically including in the 14th Amendment to be able to be trivially adjusted by either Congress or the states deciding different rules on political allegiance. But there's something really important we need to we need to focus.
I think we've hit our time. So let's take a break for a second.
Okay.
That was the end of the first round. I guess there is in the bill. Yeah, well, no, you guys will stay up here for a minute, but we're just going to give it just a couple seconds. You want to grab some water, take a break for a second.
The end of the first round. Round one, who do I give it to? I mean, I give it to Pisco. I mean, I think Ryan was not engaging with anything that Pisco was saying, to be honest. He was not engaging with the defining the concepts that he's referring to. His application of determining whether or not someone has political allegiance does not bear into the aspect of kids being born immediately into the country. He doesn't really touch upon it. He kept on talking about having allegiance to foreign countries. And he keeps on talking about parents. And Pisco kept on topic. He kept on bringing up kids. Kids are not the parents. Okay. Jurisdiction, what it is, define it. He won't. And yeah, I'll be honest, I think Ryan was pretty weaselly. I think the average person probably would hear certain things and might side with Ryan, but like if you really dissect what he was saying, I wouldn't give that round one to Ryan, and be honest.
And then I'm going to ask you guys in between here while they're setting up this next round. How's it going so far? Pisco, you seem to be getting a little frustrated with him.
Ryan had a like good little gotcha by trying to tear apart the authority of the individual that the authority of the definition of jurisdiction. He tried to do a little gotcha, a little clippable moment, but once you like understand what he's trying to do, it's ridiculous. Using the authority of the person who created the database to determine the definition of a database that is definitions that are determined based off different sources is just a ridiculous thing to do. Like he would not do. I don't think he believes that point. He might, maybe he does. Maybe that is a normal lawyer thing to do. I think that's kind of ridiculous. I don't go to the person who created Merriam-Webster to decide what what definitions are. I don't go to the person who created the King James Bible to determine what like scripture means. Like the sources are like collected by a lot of different types of information and evidence, and then they're put in a document, they're put in a book, they're put in a database. One person doesn't decide the authority of the definitions.
You have a specific line you're trying to go down. It feels like he's avoiding it. Yeah.
I think we're going to get into some hypotheticals, but we're also going to focus in on the scope of who the 14th Amendment applies to. And my strategy is, once we get into the fact that it's referring to children and not their parents, I think he's got nowhere to go with this political allegiance thing. In what sense can a baby owe political allegiance in the way that Ryan is implying?
And then Ryan, what do you think is happening here? It feels like you're trying to get a little more historical context and you keep getting cut off.
I'm delighted about how this is going because the question that Pisco raised is what's the original meaning? And the original meaning of the Constitution is determined by the history. Pisco doesn't seem prepared to discuss the history. So in a sense, he's conceded the debate.
That's a ridiculous claim. The definition is determined by the history. No, the definition is determined based off how it was intended to be defined. History doesn't determine the definition. It's the context of the creation of the term determines the definition. Well, I don't know what we're doing there. Ryan has Weasley tactics. Very Weaslly tactics.
I think
that's wild.
Decide that. That's not for you. Take clock.
I'm asking you the question. Does
The debate begins now.
So let's focus on the subject of the 14th Amendment. So just to be clear, does it refer? I'm asking you the question. You can answer it. Does it refer to the children? That is, the persons born, or does it refer to their parents? Just answer that.
I will answer this question on the guarantee that I get to ask mine when I'm done.
Sure, I can guarantee you'll ask yours. Answer his question.
So with the 14th Amendment, it says if you're born and subject to the jurisdiction, and I've asserted that means complete jurisdiction, the political allegiance of a child follows their parent. So
No, that's not an absolute claim you can make. You can't make that absolute claim because you're applying everything in regards to what the parents are and what they're doing to the child. And that's just not something you can do because they're two sovereign beings. The only thing you can do, you can say for certainty, like an absolutely certain claim, is that the jurisdiction of the child is determined based off their environmental stimuli. And their environmental stimuli can be heavily influenced by their parents, but not completely influenced by their parents. Thinking that way is just fucking retarded. I'm gonna be honest, it's just fucking stupid. The words changing over time, so you have to go back and understand the history and context of a set of documents. I agree. It's all about that. Understanding the history will determine the context of the intention behind terms being defined. Using the history in this kind of more vague manner on its utilization, because that's what it sounds like Ryan wants to do. He's using different like historical events because he did this one thing where he's like, 3 years earlier this happened, so this is why it's defined like this. And then like obviously you need to know the history of why they defined it this way in its intention. But just because there's other historical events around it, if that plays no actual bearing in terms of the intentionality of the term being defined at that point in time, then this historical events that are like surrounding it are irrelevant. They're just things that are happening. So it's regardless, you need to know history, but you need to know specific history. Ryan wants to expand the context to other different historical like phenomenon to either broaden the definition or make the definition fit into his favor, muddying up the context behind the intentionality.
Every child has the same political allegiance of their parents, which is why you look to the parents to determine what their political allegiance is.
So why is Wong Kim Ark? Was Wong Kim Ark a citizen? This is the case that we're talking about. Unless you're proposing overturning Wong Kim Ark, that case, their parents were subjects of the King of China. And yet the Supreme Court, you claim history, you claim precedent. The Supreme Court said, notwithstanding the fact that Wong Kim Ark's parents are subject to the Emperor of China, that nonetheless he is subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. You have a huge problem, don't you, Ryan?
And Wong Kim Ark was wrongly reasoned. But here's the great thing, and this is the cleverness of what President Trump did. Wong Kim Ark, even though it was technically a bad decision, it only held.
This motherfucker keeps on pretending he's not a Trump supporter. This guy, he admits all the corrupt things that Trump does, but he still sucks his dick. These type of people are like hidden, like they're agents. They're agents of chaos. They are not true centrists. That's why I low-key think Ryan is more nefarious than he makes it seem. He makes it seem like, oh, I have good morals. Nah, I don't believe it.
One single question. If someone is here legally and permanently, despite not being a citizen, do their children get citizenship? And President Trump knew about this. His lawyers told him and anticipated it. And if you look at President Trump's January 2025 executive order that limited birthright citizenship, he put it on all fours with Wong Kim Ark. He said the only people who will not get birthright citizenship going forward, who used to get it, are in situations where.
Although I'm like willing to engage with the conversation of like permanently, you can't. Okay, so permanently can't be a bar in terms of determining whether or not like they're within the jurisdiction. You can't determine permanence. That's impossible. That's predicting the future. You legit can't do that. What you can determine is legally. But the creation of the 13th Amendment was not created based off legality, because it was created for like slaves. Slaves were not legal human beings. So I just don't think this bars, and obviously it was there for Native Americans as well. I don't think either of these claims about permanence and legality fall in line with the 14th Amendment. I think you made these two shits up to create this new kind of determination on the 14th Amendment. I just don't think they fall in line. But let's see how you define it.
Illegally or temporarily, and the father does not have status.
How do you know someone's here temporarily? And then I'm going to see if Pisco can argue those 2 points. Temperance and legality. Let's see if Pisco can argue it.
Here illegally.
So Wong Kim Ark held exactly that. It's not a problem.
So if you come here illegally, you're not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. That's your contention, correct?
You're not subject to the complete jurisdiction.
Okay. So here's just a question for you. After Thomas Jefferson's administration, was it illegal to import slaves into the country?
Was it illegal to import slaves into the country?
Yes, that's a question.
I don't know the answer.
The answer was yes.
Okay.
We banned the importation of slaves. And notwithstanding they making it illegal to import slaves into the country, people still did it. And so my question for you, Ryan, is the following. For people who were brought into this country illegally against the United States law in violation of the international slave laws that banned the importation of slaves into this country, are their children citizens, yes or no?
Obviously, yes.
But they came here illegally. They came here illegally.
No.
There we go, Pisco. Immediately addressing the legality argument. Because you're going to have to argue that slaves were not citizens. So maybe Ryan will be able to answer it. We'll see. If you're on a visitor visa and have a baby, your baby shouldn't be a U.S. citizen. Why not? How would the doctor know they're on a visitor visa? I don't. If you're born here, you're born here.
Were taken here illegally.
I don't buy the
What Pisco's
argument.
conflating are people today who crossed the border illegally on purpose to have anchor babies in the country.
I'm not
with
conflating
people
that.
who were victimized and trafficked to come over here against their
that's
will.
first of all,
and
that's-
I think that the conflation there is.
Okay, so Ryan is playing like the moral argument instead of entertaining the legality argument. He's playing on your heartstrings versus playing into the legal logic chain that you introduced. This is weak pussy shit, to be honest. Okay.
Obvious, and the ramifications of the conflation are obvious. I'd like to ask my question now, Pisco, if you don't mind. Earlier.
Okay, so you didn't fucking address it at all. So Ryan had no answer for it. I'm talking points. I'm not interested in this kind of moral high ground bullshit. This is what leftists do. That shit is pussy shit to me. If you can't engage, you can't engage because you have no argument.
You said, I'm paraphrasing because I didn't write down the exact quote, but you said something along the lines of Congress didn't want to leave the issue open. They didn't want future Congresses to muck around and change citizenship. Is that right?
No, I didn't say in every respect. Of course, under Article 1, Congress has the naturalization authority to make additional rules.
Unless you're going to separate the family. Why would you separate the family? Why would you separate the family? I don't know. Why can't the kid be a citizen? And then that's it. I don't know. What's wrong with the kid being a citizen? I don't know. I don't know why you would need to separate the family. So going back to their country, not all the time. Sometimes they go back to their countries and then they come back. But what's wrong with the kid being a citizen, though? So if the kid was born here, becomes a citizen, and then goes back to their country, like, what's wrong with that? I don't get the issue.
Citizenship, but with respect to the specific birthright citizenship issue that they were trying to correct after Dred Scott led to a fucking civil war in this country, that they didn't want that to be touched by states or by Congress.
And in 1868, were Indians qualifying for birthright citizens?
They were not qualified for birthright citizenship under the Constitution because of their specific constitutional status and the fact that they're considered.
The threshold of being a citizen in the U.S. is way too low. No, it's not. It's very hard to become a citizen as an immigrant. It's very hard. And the threshold for a baby to become a citizen should be too low, to be honest. For an adult, it's extremely difficult. For a baby, it should be in 0. Babies can't do anything. They're babies. I expect babies to not have to think about all this other stuff.
Their own little islands of sovereignty. It's a sort of a peculiarity of American law that the English common law didn't have to deal with.
Because they lack political allegiance to the United States, maybe?
Because they're not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States.
They're not subject to the complete jurisdiction of the United States.
No.
Could you charge them with a crime if they robbed a bank? Of course. So could you charge them with a crime if they assaulted someone? Of course. But you could not draft them. They were not subject to the complete.
Okay.
Because they're not subject to
Ryan might be making a good point. Let's see if Pisco can actually answer this point, though.
Jurisdiction of the English common law constitution.
Indians qualifying for birthright citizens?
Indians qualify for birthright citizenship.
Were not qualified for birthright citizenship under the Constitution because of their specific constitutional status and the fact that they're considered their own little islands of sovereignty. It's a sort of a peculiarity of American law that the English common law didn't have to deal with.
Because they lack political allegiance to the United States, maybe?
Because they're not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States.
They're not subject to the complete jurisdiction of the United States.
No.
Could you charge them with a crime if they robbed a bank? Of course. So could you charge them with a crime if they assaulted someone? Of course. But you could not draft them. They were not subject to the complete allegiance of the United States. He's conceding the.
There's no concession, and I'm confused what this has to do with birthright citizenship, unless you're arguing that the Indians' babies were also not considered citizens. That'll be a very interesting point. I'll be curious to see if Pisco can contend with. If you go to any other country and birth that baby, they are not a citizen of that country. USA is better than any other country. I don't care what other countries do. India is controlled birthright citizenship where at least one parent has to be a citizen. I don't care what India does.
It's not a concession. Elk versus Watkins fits with Wong Kim Ark. The case that he's citing about American Indians is because they are, in fact, treated differently, much the same as, like, for example, diplomats are in different kinds of ways. They're their own sovereign islands in the United States. It's a peculiarity of American jurisprudence, but it proves the point. It proves the point that subject to the jurisdiction in general means subject to the laws, the authority of the United States. And what he's told you is, and you're going to answer this question, that Congress, if it wanted to, could create a test for political allegiance and thereby.
Okay. So Pisco's answer to the Indians of Brian's question bared no fruit in terms of overall argument of birthright citizenship. I just don't see what the correlation is. He didn't really explain it well to me. But as for Pisco's answer, he just said they're kind of a peculiar nature. They're sovereign, but you would have to determine, Pisco, like, does this irregularity challenge the legitimacy of birthright citizenship? Why are you, unless you say it's a mistake, which is a interesting concession you would have to determine whether or not you should make. I don't know.
I changed the meaning of the 14th Amendment. Yes.
I mean,
Could they or not? Could they or not?
Could they? They already have. What Pisco told you is that Indians did not get birthright citizenship in 1868 because they were their own sovereigns. They did not have
Because they're
complete
not
political
subject to the jurisdiction.
But then in 1924, Congress passed a law that made it so that they did get birthright citizenship. And now they are completely subject to American jurisdiction. They do have complete allegiance, and now they get birthright citizenship. So not only can Congress do this, Congress already
Why
has.
would Congress do that in the 1860s? Why would Congress make a constitutional provision, the Citizenship Clause, that could be so trivially adjusted by just passing a law that says, oh, now we consider these people to be political? Do you understand how much abuse could be done if all of a sudden Democrats get in charge of the United States government? They say anyone who supported January 6th, we're construing them as not having political allegiance to the United States, and therefore their kids don't get birthright citizenship, putting aside the fact that the 14th Amendment applies to children, not to their parents. Why would they do that? They just fought a civil war to settle an issue. They didn't want to have future generations question the war that they just fought and the question of membership into a club. So of course, the American Indian exception proves the rule. It proves the rule that being subject to the jurisdiction of the United States means being subject to the power and legal authority of the United States, which of course the children of such people are. And if you take his interpretation, there's no limiting principle there. Even lawful permanent residents, right? They don't innately have, they're not subject to the political allegiance in the way that he's suggesting. And so it doesn't have any limiting principle. It means whatever Congress says political allegiance means. And that can't be what the Civil War generation wanted to do to settle this important question and just limit for whatever Congress or whatever state governments wanted to find political allegiance to be. That isn't what they meant.
Pisco just took a very long time to say he couldn't.
Pisco, you had to address the 1920s differences. Like, okay, they shouldn't do this, but in 1920s they did. Why did they do that? You didn't really answer that, Pisco. So this Ryan might have gotten you on that one.
Possibly imagine how Congress could do something that I just proved that Congress did. So I don't really care whether Pisco can imagine how they can do it because the historical record proves that it actually happened. And Pisco, if we're doing hypotheticals, let me ask you. No. You just talk for like 10 minutes, brother. Let me ask you this. If America tomorrow passed a law that said we no longer honor diplomatic immunity, we no longer care if diplomats are immune, we're going to prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law every single time. On your definition, would that change birthright citizenship?
It wouldn't change birthright citizenship. You're adjusting one of the exceptions of subject to the jurisdiction thereof, but not, those are in the exceptions, right? You're not changing it for the vast swaths.
Pisco only has two exceptions, ambassadors and Indians. Now they both changed.
So three exceptions. And what's preferable? A rule where you can adjust at the margins about, invasion and about American Indians and diplomats, or a rule where the entire thing is up for the next generation to decide. Of course, that's absurd. And no, in the 20th century, they didn't give American Indians political allegiance by statute. They used their Article I authorities to give automatic naturalization to people born on American Indian reservations. That's what they did then. And if it
that's
were the
what political allegiance is.
At a bare minimum, you should accept, though, that if we're looking to what Congress does, the statutes that Congress passed in the 1940s, 1950s, which includes their interpretation of Wong Kim Ark, that when they passed those laws, regardless of whether you think, Ryan, in your majesty, that Wong Kim Ark was wrongly decided, the members who made the statutes in the 1940s and 50s, they understood what Wong Kim Ark did. They understood that they were incorporating the English common law as Wong Kim Ark says they did. You can't cite the Supreme Court and say that you're the one grounded in history by ignoring the reasoning of the Supreme Court and the later Congresses that ratified that interpretation into law. So even if it were the case that we would accept your preposterous elastic where political allegiance means anything you want, and you'll notice he didn't say that it would be impermissible for Congress to define political allegiance such that it would apply to anyone who supported Trump. There's nothing
so
about what
happy
he offered
that Pisco
would limit
wants
that situation.
I'm so happy that Pisco wants to get into the history, but he picked the wrong era. He's talking about the 1930s, but the question is, what did these words mean circa 1868?
Not under statute.
Now, here's what's interesting about that. In 1873, the Attorney General wrote, the word jurisdiction must be understood to mean absolute or complete jurisdiction, such as the United States had over its...
It's not political allegiance. He's talking about its national allegiance. I mean, Ryan keeps on bringing political allegiance, so... I guess, I don't know, same thing.
Before the adoption of the amendment. Complete jurisdiction must be understood to mean absolute or complete jurisdiction. But the question is, what did these words mean circa 1868?
Not under statute.
Now, here's what's interesting about that. In 1873, the Attorney General wrote, the word jurisdiction must be understood to mean absolute or complete jurisdiction, such as the United States had over its citizens before the adoption of the amendment. Complete jurisdiction.
You're repeating yourself, Ryan. You're not defining it. You just add the word complete. Like, Jesus fuck. I will say Ryan is winning round 2 right now. I think the problem is not necessarily Pisco's argument, it's his articulation and parsing out the Indian example. I just don't think he did a good enough job to do that.
My point. Then, in 1885, there were several examples where secretaries of state...
The first thing he said was a dumb fucking point. This guy said complete. I keep on saying complete. My point. You have no point. You just add a word complete. You're not saying a definition.
And the Department of Justice denied birthright citizenship in situations where, for example, a German couple was here temporarily, they had a kid, they took the kid back to Germany, and then they wrote a letter that said, is our child a citizen? And our government in 1885 said, no, this is after the 14th Amendment was ratified. Clearly, they didn't believe in universal birthright citizenship then. There's another story. Miss Devereaux, I forgot her first name, I'm sorry. She was an Irish woman. She was trying to enter New York, and she was held up. They were processing the paperwork. Her boat was held in the harbor, and she went into labor. Because the people there were not monsters, they took her to a hospital in New York where she gave birth. Her child had birthright citizenship according to Pisco, but did the government think so? No. The government said that she had to go back to Ireland. Her kid was not a citizen because she was only here temporarily, and she had to take the kid with her. So clearly, in 1800s, where Pisco does not want to talk about because he's doing 1930s, this was not the understanding of these words. And while Pisco wanted to throw my originalism in my face, what I'm actually interested in is the original meaning of these words, which is why I'm talking about evidence from that
very
time period.
sneaky tactics here from Ryan. So he pretends that I'm unmoored from the 1860s. No, we can talk about the 1860s all you want. When I was referencing an alternative argument, which is the 20th century enactment of laws incorporating then understanding of the Supreme Court precedent of Wong Kim Ark, obviously with respect to the statute, what I'm talking about is originalism on that score, not the Constitution. So sneaky to say that I'm ignoring originalism for purpose of a statute that he knows is with reference to the 1940s and 1950s. But no, take the rule in the 1860s. What was understood by the time of those people was that they were incorporating the then existing laws of birth by territory. That's what they were doing. And this isn't just some thing coming out of Zeus's head. That was the prevailing English common law rule that you can see out of state courts in New York and various different states of the Union that recognized at the time the prevailing rule. The prevailing rule was that, yes, even temporary visitors are subject to allegiance in the sense of protection, in the sense of they are bound by the laws of the government of the United States. And his interpretation would lead to absurdities. And here's a hypothetical, Ryan. If Congress wanted to, could it define political allegiance under the 14th Amendment such that no alien is politically aligned to the United States? Yes or no?
No alien?
Yes, no alien.
Yeah, they could do that.
So this is what Ryan is trying to tell you, that Congress, with a stroke of a pen, after they passed an amendment, after they fought a bloody civil war, could just get rid of birthright citizenship for anyone who's not a U.S. citizen. But that can't have been, just like
not going backwards, going
but that can't have been what the founding generation of the 14th Amendment wanted to do. They already had laws that allowed for this kind of citizenship through the blood and the parentage of the people. So they couldn't have wanted it for it to be possible for Congress to just edit out the 14th Amendment. I know that's what a lot of you people want to do, is just get rid of the 14th Amendment and pretend it doesn't exist. But if they had wanted the 14th Amendment to be as elastic as Ryan is suggesting, they just would have overturned Dred Scott and left the rest of Congress to future years. That's not what they were trying to do.
See, Pisco keeps saying this is what they were not trying to do. But again and again, I've given you historical evidence of why that is exactly what happened. So I don't know why Pisco's hypotheticals would possibly outweigh the examples I've given you of what the government actually did in 1863, in 1885, in 1973, over and over again. And by the way, this wasn't something that was like frozen in time. If you flash forward into the 1930s that Pisco is so fond of, you might remember that we had a guest work program where millions of Mexicans came to the country to do guest work. And while they were here, it is estimated that 400,000 children were born. After that program ended due to the Great Depression, there was a mass repatriation, which was largely voluntary, but did include many deportations, and not a single claim for birthright citizenship of those children in NERD because it wasn't thought that they had birthright citizenship because they were here
If we're going by
temporarily.
government practice, you have to agree that the overwhelming government practice throughout the entirety of since the 14th Amendment has been to grant birthright citizenship precisely in the way I suggest. That is the overwhelming practice, correct?
Since the 1950s.
No,
but
before
they
then.
were- But keep in mind,
Wait, no, is the
I'm
answer
asking
yes,
what-
Ryan?
When I cite government practice, I'm not citing it because I say government practice controls everything going forward. I'm citing it because I'm
Yeah, Pisco, that's what you had to do. I was wondering why you were letting him play this singular anecdotal circumstances. Because the overwhelming majority of people who are born here, regardless of situation, are just made into citizens. But he kept on playing this one situation means that it shouldn't exist. Pisco was kind of granting that for a
asking
while.
what is the original meaning of this provision. So I'm trying to give you examples of what the government believed at this time, 1868. What the government was doing in 1970 or 1983 has very little
So in the
to do with that
1860s
question, whereas what they were doing in 1873 is highly probative.
Let's put together two parts of what Ryan said. Ryan said that it's possible for Congress to withdraw birthright citizenship through political allegiance of any alien. He said this.
Going forward,
and
not going backwards.
No, you're saying that
clarified when you asked the question.
it would have been possible for earlier Congresses to get rid of birthright citizenship for any alien. You did say that.
No, I said going forward. You said that. And
Is
I
there
said,
something
yes,
special about the
going
year
forward.
2026 that going forward only means from 2026 onward? Where's that coming from?
The reason this matters, and this is very in the weeds legally, so I hope.
All right, so just put it past.
No. The reason you said it, so I'm going to explain it. In law, there's something called reliance interests. It's one thing for Congress to change the law and say, in the future, we're going to limit birthright citizenship because those kids aren't born yet. They don't rely on it. This is in the future. Going back in time and taking away from citizens
No,
who
that's
have
not-
lived here
that's-
for a long
that's-
time is
that's-
clearly different.
No,
legally.
that's not what I'm
And
talking
let me
about.
finish the point. This is why President Trump's executive order only applies going forward. He is not
Yeah, that's
seeking
slimy. That's not
to
what I'm
take
talking
away
about.
birthright citizenship from anybody who already has it, and the Supreme Court will not decide that question because President Trump has not asked them to.
So I'm not
it's
I'm
literally
not
just
suggesting
part
I'm
of
not
the-
suggesting that the executive order, at no point did I suggest that the executive order is backward facing or imply it. What I'm saying is it's your belief that Congress could have in the 1860s defined political allegiance so as to exclude any alien, and you did say that.
I said yes, going forward.
And you're talking about 1868. That's great. That's the frame of reference I want to use. I'm applying originalism. It was totally understood by the framing generation that Chinese people of Chinese descent who are here they could not have birthright citizenship taken away from them. That is clear in the debates, in the 1860 debates. How do you square that? The two things. One, that he says that Congress, if it wanted to, could deprive birthright citizenship of any alien, including people of Chinese descent, and the fact that in the debate about the 14th Amendment, if that's what we're going through, that they said they couldn't. It's a contradiction because it's not true. He's inventing political allegiance. Jurisdiction doesn't mean political allegiance. It means the power of the state. I have jurisdiction to hear a case. I have jurisdiction, IRS has jurisdiction over your taxes. It means power. It means authority, not this.
So, all right, they're at the Wong Kim thing. United States versus Wong Kim Ark. Ratified in 1868, the 14th Amendment opens with the Citizenship Clause. It reads, all person born or naturalized in the United States and subject to jurisdiction thereof are citizens, blah, blah, blah. Supreme Court addressed the meaning of this key provision in the United States v. Wong Kim Ark. Wong Kim Ark was born in San Francisco to parents who were both Chinese citizens. At age 21, he took a trip to China to visit his parents. When he returned to the United States, he was denied entry on the ground that he was not a U.S. citizen. In a 6-2 decision, the court ruled in favor of Wong Kim Ark because he was born in the United States and his parents were not employed in any diplomatic or official capacity under the Emperor of China. The Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment automatically made him a U.S. citizen. The case highlighted a disagreement between the justices over the premise meaning of one key phrase in the Citizenship Clause, subject to just jurisdiction thereof. So that's the summary. The problem here for Pisco is that he's allowing Ryan to dictate the narrative that is being told in this conversation. If Ryan is making the claim that historical context determined that at that period of time, people who are temporary citizens do not deserve birthright citizenship. And then for Pisco, he literally said, wait. And then Ryan gave a number. He said 1950s. Pisco, all he had to do is go like, that's some bullshit. 1898, they made the law and they defined it. And this is an example of a temporary citizen. Like, that's all he had to do. he could have buried everything that Ryan is doing right now. And the whole idea is that this kind of originalist meaning on how they determine whether or not this is a citizen, all that shit is irrelevant, because the moment the Supreme Court determines or clarifies the meaning of the Constitution, everything before then means fucking nothing. It doesn't mean jack shit, right? It means nothing. So Pisco didn't have to play this game with Ryan. He goes like, they actually had a situation like this. They determined what the situation is, not in the 1950s, actually in 1898, and they determined the like definition of the term that we need to focus on, jurisdiction, and this is what it means. This is how it's applied, and this is how it applies to people who are illegal immigrants. It's like, if Pisco keeps on hammering that consistently and not letting Ryan dictate these like random points he's just fucking throwing out there, he would be in a better spot. But Pisco is not in a good spot at all. He lived here 21 years and owned a house. The fact he owned a house is why he won the case. I haven't read this. I'll say because he was born in the United States, parents were not employed. Well, this says because he was born in the United States. This is a summary. Because he was born in the United States. And his parents were not employed in any diplomatic or official capacity under the Emperor of China. So his parents not being like political envoys, you know, kind of similar premises like diplomats for a different country, because diplomats have a different types of jurisdiction. This all this says is because he was born in the United States. Child born in the United States of parents of Chinese descent, at this time his birth is subject to the Emperor of China, permanent domicile residence in the United States, carrying a bonnet are not employed in aid, blah, 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 as appears upon the face of the amendment, as well as from the history. This was not intended to impose any new restrictions upon citizenship, or any person becomes citizen by the fact of birth within the United States, who would thereby have become citizens according to the laws existing before its adoption. I mean, it says born. I don't know what this house shit you're talking about is. They said born. So, like I said, Pisco, all he had to do is that, but he's losing this because Ryan's muddying the argument.
Loosey-goosey test where we can invent Republicans not having political allegiance. That's what his test will lead to.
Pisco's concerned about the hype of.
He doesn't need to focus on like this kind of like fallacious determination of this kind of loose or ever-changing diction of what the 14th Amendment should mean. Pisco doesn't need to focus there. He doesn't need at all. That's what people are not buying what you're selling, because that's like, it's not begging the current conversation. In the case, this was a major part of him winning because he had to prove he was here. Just because he proved he was here doesn't mean that that was the reason why he won. They said the reason why he was a citizen is because he was born here. Proving that he was born here is a different case altogether. But the ultimate crux of the ultimate crux in determining his citizenship is the fact that he was born here.
When, as I explained earlier, this has literally already happened. At one point, Native Americans were subject to the jurisdiction in the way Pisco's talking about. You could sue them, you could throw them in jail, but they were not qualifying for birthright citizens because they did not have sufficient political allegiance. And then in 1924, Congress, in its wisdom, changed that. And now they do have political allegiance because Congress made a change. And as I pointed out earlier, if you change the...
They didn't change the rules. They just changed, they just recognized the kind of ridiculousness of not including Native Americans is what it sounds like. Because Native Americans were here first. There was a whole thing about allowing Native Americans to have their own land. And then eventually a deal was made where it's like, okay, you're just Americans now, right? It's definitely a different situation because they were here first. So there's no way that can be synonymous to any other example moving forward, because there's no other individuals that you can claim that have a similar circumstance of Native Americans who we wanted to give them a level of sovereignty because we did fuck them over when we came here. So Pisco, just make that claim. Stop using Native Americans. There's no actual like synonymous comparison you can make. for anybody at all, period, regarding America. So this is just a, flawed analogy.
Rules about ambassadors, that would change their birthright citizenship status as well. It's clear Congress can change these things. Pisco just doesn't like that they can, but I'm not sure why that's
Here's the
relevant,
kicker.
because they've already done it.
Here's the kicker. Do all U.S. citizens have political allegiance to the United States?
Yes.
Why? By virtue of what?
Pisco, you and I think many people in the audience will remember this experience.
Answer the question.
You turned 18. If you're a gentleman, you received a selective service card. You had to register for the draft. And if you didn't,
What about from 17 to 0? You have political allegiance when you're 18? What about when you're 17 to 0? Pisco, easy questions. What about when you're 17 to 0? Easy
you could be
questions.
thrown in jail.
But Ryan,
why did you have that obligation? Because you owe complete
wait.
political allegiance
Wait a
to
second.
the United
So
States. Could not be more
absurd.
obvious.
It's absurd. So listen to what he just said, right? He says, complete jurisdiction by which means political allegiance for all U.S. citizenship is given by virtue of your signing up for the draft card. But here,
evidence of it.
putting aside that there's no evidence whatsoever, no writings in the text that support this kind of intuition that political allegiance turns on your draftability, whatever. It's all nonsense. It's all ahistorical. It excludes.
Whoa.
Wait, no,
I gave you the evidence earlier.
Excuse me.
You not remember?
So it excludes women
You didn't give
who don't have to
evidence.
sign up for the draft, and by virtue of this, could be denied political allegiance by your own test, and the fact that you're
That's a good one. Keep on going. People who don't have to sign up for the draft, I'm sure there's examples of like people with disability, for example. You also could bring up, do all women have to sign up for the draft now? I don't know that. I don't know if that's true. Do women have to sign up for select? How the fuck did my computer know I was looking up whether or not women had to sign up for selective service? Women do not have to sign up for selective service. So women don't have to sign up. Certain people with disabilities don't have to sign up. 17 to 0. Ryan's point is fucking dog shit. You have political allegiance when you sign up for the draft. That's like a percentage of people in America. What about everybody else? Come on, Pisco. This is an easy cook. Come on. Do your thing. Come on, Pisco.
completely warps the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment applies to babies. Subject to the jurisdiction, political allegiance applies to babies. So, of course, it's ridiculous on your own view to think that political allegiance by dint of U.S. citizenship is granted through the draft.
Oh, really? Let me look that up. Who is not required to sign up for selective service? I'm gonna just put that for selective service. The exemptions. Most women, men currently on full-time active duty, men before, and some non-immigrant. Oh, you might be right about the disabilities. Hold on, let me look at this documentation. Who needs to register? Almost all male U.S. citizens and male immigrants who are 18 through 25 are required to register with selective service. Know that even though he is registered male, will not automatically be inducted into the military. In a crisis requiring draft, men will be called in a sequence determined by random lottery number, blah, blah, blah. A chart of who must register is also available in PDF. All right, let's look at it. So, military related members of the armed forces, active duty, obviously don't have to sign up. Students in officer procurement programs, cadets and midships, okay, sure. Lawful non-immigrants on current non-immigrant visas, so seasonal agricultural workers on H-2A visas, so people on like work visas don't have to sign up for selective service, and incarcerated, hospitalized, or institutionalized for medical reasons. So, okay, not disabled, but like if you're seriously injured or if you're like mentally insane, okay, or obviously if you're in jail, continue confined to a resident hospital or okay. So yeah, people with disability do have to sign up. You're correct. Good thing we fact checked that. But what all these people who can't, there's obviously a good number who can't. They don't apply apparently. No, that says must register within 30 days of release. Oh, did it? Actually, must register with 30 days release unless already 26. For people who are yeah, you're correct. You're correct there. Good catch. Good catch. Good catch. And there's some more like exemptions for that for like certain like territories owned by the United States of America. Yeah. Gotcha.
cards if it's saying that babies are the ones who have political allegiance. And of course, they haven't signed any draft selected service cards.
The political allegiance.
Yeah, that's a stupid point.
Obviously follows their parents. I have two beautiful girls. When they were born, their political allegiance was my political allegiance because they.
I don't give a fuck if your political allegiance is your political allegiance. That's not determinative. It's not. Just because your parents believe something does not automatically mean that the kids will believe something. That's a ridiculous claim to make. I'm be honest. You're not stupid enough to believe that. All those teenagers who became crash out, who started fucking crazy because they had strict Christian parents, I beg to differ. All right, I beg to differ. Okay, all right, come on, lock in.
We're babies. To think that this is a complicated legal question is to get lost in the weeds of like the deep type of.
So then why did you say this thing about draft?
No, it's not getting lost in the weeds. It's not getting lost in the weeds. That's why when a lot of things that kids do, they do a certain crime, the parents are not held accountable because kids are a sovereign entity. They're individuals. Their allegiances can be determined by environmental factors, but it's not like they're like chained to their parents.
Overcomplicate things that are not.
So why did you say this? So why did you say that? I asked you the question, and why did you say this about the draft card? If all you meant to say was political allegiance tracks of parents, you didn't say that.
Because
you said draft. And now this is a walk back because he realizes that the mess he made for himself, that when he said draft card, he's excluding half the population.
This is why,
and he's excluding babies.
Why I said draft card. Pisco, if you want to ask the question with.
Hey, Pisco cooked here. That was a fucking dumb fucking point by Ryan. Pisco cooked here.
Earlier, and you seem to have just forgot that I said this, when I was explaining the concept of complete allegiance, complete jurisdiction,
What about women, Ryan? Pisco, bring up women again. What about women? He keeps on playing the stupid games. What about women? Unless he believes that women are politically allegiant to men. It's like, wait, how are kids politically allegiant to their parents when their mother is not politically allegiant because they can't sign up for the draft? How does that work, Ryan? Oh man, only if Pisco had Pisco, that's just a W question. I need you to lock in, my boy. You gotta be more witty. You gotta calm down. To be fair, I'm in a privileged position where I am not on the debate stage. I can just be witty, just reacting to it. But come on.
Mentioned that in 1863 there were foreigners in the country and the country had to decide could they be drafted. That was the example that was on the mind of the Congress people 3 years later. And what did they decide? They decided that only foreigners who had signed a declaration of intent and said that they owe complete political allegiance to this country could be drafted. So the idea that 3 years later the same Congress people would find this idea puzzling is laughable. Obviously they knew what complete political allegiance was.
It didn't mean draft cards.
The law 3 years ago.
So it didn't mean you signing up for the draft, and that's the answer that you provided. That you're walking back. You're walking back because you know it's garbage. If signing up for the draft was all it took for political allegiance, where are the writings in the 14th Amendment in the 1860s that state this? They're saying Chinese people, even temporary people who are here, are citizens. They didn't say that Congress can take that away. Of course, it's absurd.
Time. Good job, guys. Good job.
Children have no sovereignty. I mean, that's not true. Children obviously have sovereignty. It's clearly not true. Children are like they're their own human beings. They make their own decisions.
Really well done.
All right. I don't care about closing statements. Who did I think I won the debate? I think Pisco won. I think it got once they started talking about like the Indian stuff. Like Pisco was drowning, Ryan was clearly winning. I think from the beginning parts, Pisco was clearly winning. Ryan was being a little weasel. The moment Ryan asked the question about the Indians, Pisco struggled to deal with that question. And at the very end, Pisco started coming back because of Ryan's like whole political allegiance stuff was fucking dog shit and dumb as fuck. All right. I want to hear the Q&A and then we'll move on to the next.
Is your question for Ryan or for Pisco? Let me put it this way. Okay, so come and line up on this side, right there. There's
close debate, though. Close debate. There was not. It's not like
Pisco. Who has a question for Pisco?
Like a 4-3 series.
Okay, I can see the hand on the other side of the camera, so come on to this side. Or I guess right behind you, sorry, apologize for that. All right, let's get that question for Ryan first.
Hey, what's going on, buddy?
Doing good. So I have a little bit, I think, great arguments from you, great arguments from Pisco, but I feel like there's a little bit of an idea supplied by your argument, which is that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. That basically the children are responsible for the sins of their fathers when they come into America. Which that idea, it seems kind of like an old world idea and something that we don't apply to people in America. We have these dreams of like individual liberty, and the idea that a child would be punished because of the actions of their parents, such that they couldn't even be granted citizenship in the country. That seems very old-minded to me. So I guess what would you
I think
suggest that?
It's actually the opposite priority. Like if you think about the English common law rule that Pisco was talking about, it was a rule of subjecthood. The leading scholar of that area is named Blackstone. He wrote 4 volumes on this. He doesn't mention the word citizenship once because you weren't citizens in England. You were subjects to a feudal lord. So when America rejected this proposition, it's far from the sins of the father. What we're saying is we have a social compact. That's why the Declaration of Independence says that we're governed by the consent of the governed, right? And to be part of a social compact, the people have to let you in. So the question is not really the sins of the father. It's more if somebody is breaking the social compact on purpose, are we required constitutionally to reward them? And I think the answer.
What? This is another dog shit answer. You are literally doing the sins of the father. I don't give a fuck. Okay, the father broke the social contract. The child pays for it. You're not rewarding the parent. You're punishing the child. You were literally doing exactly what he said you were doing. You're punishing the child for something the father did. You're doing it. Someone please call Ryan out on this bullshit. I don't care how flowery you try to make it. You're still doing the same thing. I'm punishing the child for what the father did.
There's no for all the reasons I described.
Well, can I do one?
Dog
Sure,
shit.
go ahead.
Final thing. I guess even this idea, this term social compact.
This answer is too high level for 95% of people to understand, unless he didn't make a legal scholarly argument at all. So Ryan failed. This answer is you're talking about the answer to this guy's question. Oh, okay. Yeah, that was not a good answer at all to the question. He literally just did exactly what he said he was doing.
Right? I think you make a delineation between a social compact and the social contract for a reason. And this idea of a social compact that everyone is forced into, this feels like a sort of collectivism, which seems antithetical to the American project to me.
No, I don't think that's collectivism. I think
social compact, it must be, right?
Government must be social compact because the only way that you can have power over people justly is through their consent. So when people consent to be governed, and in fact, when they consent to be governed, that's actually what complete jurisdiction, complete political allegiance is. That comes with responsibilities like the draft, like the fact that you could be charged with treason. But that's not collectivism, that's justice.
All right, yeah, I'll give it there. I mean, great job for you guys. Yeah.
Nice job. All right, so go ahead. Your question's for Pisco, right?
Yeah.
Hey, Pisco, good. I'm a Covert Patriot on X. So my question is, why are you obviously like blatantly ignoring the fact that the people that there are, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people, I don't know the exact numbers that
he's about to give us he's about to give the most based fucking question of all time. Please give it to me, MAGA. Give me. It's like when an actual see the night and day of these two questions. The night and day is going to be hilarious. Problem with most lawyers is that they can't talk like normal people, so what they say just goes straight over their heads. Yes, I agree. And I agree. I agree generally. It's just Ryan. Ryan did the lawyer thing because another lawyer thing and a politics thing is trying to like make your answer seem much more nuanced than it actually is. Just because he gave an answer in a kind of a roundabout way does not mean he answered the question. You really got to pay attention to what he's saying because the crux of the answer itself is not truly being addressed. And that's what Ryan did. He said a bunch of stuff. It was like, okay, it probably sounds good to the average person, but for someone like me, okay, you said this, but you still didn't answer his fucking question. You did exactly what he said you were doing.
They have no interest in being American citizens. They don't share any of American values. They have no interest in actually living here, residing here, living by our Constitution. And they're obviously just doing this to exploit that, whatever, you want to call it, whether it's a loophole or just like your idea of universal, the universal idea that, if
taking all our benefits,
taking
taking our health care.
I don't ignore it.
Yes.
I think that the values that you bring up, that a lot of people are pointing out, that
Pisco, my answer would be so clear. Yeah, there's not 100,000s of people coming in here and fucking hating the country. You made that up. See, I wouldn't be as nice as Pisco. I was like, you made that shit up. Most of the people who come into the country is because they really do like a country and trying to make a life for themselves and try to acquire the American dream that's slowly fading away. That's what I would have said initially. I don't know why you're trying to entertain like this is a real fucking question. Then the second thing you do is you do address the small number of people who are taking advantage of it, even though most aren't. Like objectively, statistically, factually, most are not taking advantage of the systems. But for the small amount of people that are, want to find justice, we don't want those people to do it. If you can't find them objectively, if you can't find evidence of them being criminals, if you can't find them evidence or taking advantage of the system, they should either be deported or put in jail. But most of them are not. Simple answer, Pisco. Come on.
certain people who cross the border don't seem to share from your perspective.
He said what he did because he's going legalese with it instead of just simplifying it down to be human. Well, what Ryan said was not legalese. What Ryan said just was a roundabout way of like saying that he still puts the sins on the father. He didn't really say anything legalese. He didn't say anything complicated. At the very least, to me, it wasn't complicated. It just, oh man, I don't know how to explain. I guess it's like Shakespeare, right? It's like when you want a simple answer, but then someone gives you like a Shakespearean Shakespeare-like type of answer. It's going to sound good. It's going to sound different. It might sound very eloquent, but in general, he's answering the question just like you would answer it in a normal fashion, but it just sounds different. And you could argue it sounds more intelligent. Some people would argue that, I guess. Sure. That's about the whole debate with, oh, okay. No, I mean, I don't think Ryan was too complicated. I could follow everything he was saying. I think a lot of his things that he was saying was bullshit, though. I wasn't buying the bullshit.
Things like, properly integrated into our societies. The very fact that there's so...
I think Pisco struggles with it more. Sometimes Pisco be yapping. He be fucking yapping. I'm like, Pisco, calm down. Like, Pisco be saying just random shit. Sometimes Pisco needs to like tone it down for sure. Should I start a political channel? Austin, I've seen you a few times. Maybe. I don't know. Do you know politics?
Much disagreement about what that means and what that entails is that any test that turns on subjective preferences regarding whether or not someone has fully assimilated or things like that can't have been what the framers of the Constitution wanted when they set a rule.
See, this is not a good answer because what the fuck is this answer? The answer I gave would be much simpler, to the point. The answer you're giving, he's like, like, Pisco, what the fuck? What kind of answer is this? What kind of answer is this? Lock in, my boy. Jesus.
At a time when our country was more divided. The Civil War was a time when we were more at each other's throats, hundreds of thousands of people, brother against brother. So that's a policy disagreement or policy argument that doesn't resolve the fundamental question. There are a lot of constitutional provisions that people can abuse. People can abuse, I guess, their due process rights. You've heard this, right? That, why do we give these people due process when we come into the, Kilmar Abrego Garcia? And people say, well, he came here illegally.
You're doing too much for this answer. You're just doing too much, my boy. Jesus, come on.
Why should he get the benefit of the due process clause? People abuse, some might say, the right against self-incrimination. Why do we protect people who plead the fifth? Right? These are criminals. We should force them to say what act.
I already got huge ideas and great ways to fix issues that hurt our society. Let me hear it. Let me hear some, Austin. I'll give you my stamp of approval.
Actually happen on pain of perjury. But the reason why sometimes strong constitutional provisions will unfortunately get in some bad actors is if we don't have that level of robustness, even when there are policy reasons against it, it undermines all of our protections, the good people, And the test he just gave you, that is of political allegiance, that is the whim and discretion of the people in Congress. Who trusts Congress here?
I'm gonna be honest, Pisco, your response makes me fall asleep. I'm not gonna lie. All right. That's all I got. I don't really care about everybody else's content. Pisco, he sometimes he kind of gets a little too heated. His body gets a little warm, and he just be yapping. But overall, I think Pisco won.